The acid rain of Neridian fell in heavy curtains, washing over Commander Rick Carter's hunched form as he knelt before the grave marker. The cemetery on the outskirts of the city was empty, save for him, the rows of monuments to the fallen, stretching into the mist like silent sentinels. Water streamed down his face, mingling with tears he would deny were he questioned. His uniform, normally pristine with the insignia of the Alliance Command emblazoned across the chest, was soaked through, clinging to his broad shoulders. The marker was simple: Lieutenant Anne Reve, fallen in service to the Alliance. There was no mention of her Neridian heritage, her unparalleled tactical mind, or the way her eyes would catch the light when she laughed. Nothing of her true essence remained in this cold stone. "I should have been there," Rick whispered, his voice nearly lost in the downpour. "I gave the order that sent you to Neridian Pass. I should have known it was a trap." His fingers traced the engraved letters of her name, feeling each curve and line as if trying to memorize them. "The Alliance brass are calling it a victory now. 17 dead including you, but we secured the objective." He spat the last words. The Battle of Neridian Pass had been the turning point in the Alliance's struggle against the Keldari insurgents. Officially, it was a stunning tactical success. Unofficially, Rick understood it for what it was: a calculated sacrifice of good soldiers for political gain. In the 3 weeks since he had reviewed the mission logs countless times, searching for what he'd missed, how he could have saved her. "We were more than commanding officer and lieutenant, weren't we?" He smiled sadly at the memory of stolen moments in the strategy room after hours of shared glances across the command bridge. Their relationship, forbidden by Alliance regulations on fraternization, especially between species, had been a carefully guarded secret. "I never told you how much you meant to me. I was too concerned with regulations with appearances." Lightning cracked overhead briefly, illuminating the cemetery in stark white light. In its flash, Rick could almost see her standing before him, tall and lithe with that characteristic Neridian grace, her silvery eyes alive with intelligence and warmth. "They gave me a promotion for the operation's success," he continued bitterly. "Commander Rick Carter, hero of the Alliance. If they only knew how I've been haunting the records archive, questioning the intelligence that led us to that pass." He paused, glancing over his shoulder reflexively. Even here at a gravesite, one couldn't be too careful. The Alliance had eyes everywhere. "I've learned things, Anra. About Project Phoenix. About why the Keldari wanted that outpost so badly." His voice dropped to a barely audible whisper. "I think your death wasn't just collateral damage. I think it might have been the point." Thunder rolled across the sky, and the rain intensified, pounding against his back. Rick placed a small metal insignia at the base of the marker, Anra's personal commandship that he'd kept as a memento. "This is goodbye, Lieutenant. I've requested transfer to the outer colonies. I can't stay here, not with what I know, not with these suspicions." He stood slowly, his knees stiff from kneeling in the cold rain. "I loved you, Anra. May you find peace among the stars." As he turned to leave, a light touch fell upon his shoulder. So gentle that at first, he thought it was merely a heavy raindrop or a trick of the wind. But then, the touch became firmer. 5 distinct points of pressure. Fingers. "Hello, Rick," came a voice he had heard in his dreams every night since the battle. A voice he had resigned himself to never hearing again. Rick spun around his hand instinctively, moving to the sidearm at his hip. Standing before him, equally drenched by the relentless rain, was Anra. Her silver eyes, with their characteristic Neridian luminescence, regarded him with a mixture of caution and longing. Her dark hair was shorter than he remembered, and there was a new scar tracing her left jawline, but it was unmistakably her. Anra. The name escaped his lips as little more than a breath. "How? I saw the casualty reports. Your body was recovered. There was a funeral." His mind raced through possibilities. A twin, a doppelganger, a hallucination born of grief and guilt. "I know," she said softly. I've been watching you for days, trying to find the right moment. She glanced around the empty cemetery. I couldn't let you leave for the outer colonies without knowing. Rick's training took over suspicion, overriding his emotional shock. Prove you're her. Tell me something only Anra would know. A sad smile crossed her face. After the Centauri mission, you found me in the observatory deck. I was counting stars to calm my mind after losing half my squad. You sat with me for 3 hours without speaking, then asked me about the Neridian constellation myths. It was the first time I felt you might see me as more than just another officer. The memory hit Rick like a physical blow. It was true, every word of it, and nothing that would have appeared in any official record. How? He demanded, his voice cracking. I identified your body myself. Anra's eyes darted to the shadows between the grave markers. Not here. I'm being hunted, Rick, by our own people. She held out her hand. If you truly meant what you just said at my grave, come with me. I'll explain everything. For a heartbeat, Rick hesitated. This violated every protocol, every regulation he'd sworn to uphold. If this was some kind of trap. But the alternative was walking away from the woman. He'd mourned the woman he loved. He took her hand. My transport is at the north gate. They moved quickly through the cemetery, sticking to the shadows cast by the larger monuments. Rick noticed that Anra moved differently. There was a new precision to her gait, a mechanical efficiency that hadn't been there before. When they reached his vehicle, a standard-issue Alliance hover transport, she scanned it with suspicious eyes. It could be tagged, she warned. It's a personal vehicle, not military issue, Rick assured her, unlocking the doors with a wave of his hand. I'm not completely careless. Once inside, with the rain drumming on the roof, Rick turned to truly look at her. In the confined space, he could smell her familiar scent beneath the rain. That unique Neridian pheromone signature that had always reminded him of mountain flowers. It was really her. Talk, he said simply. Anra's silver eyes seemed to glow slightly in the dim light. What do you know about Project Phoenix? Only rumors. A classified Alliance initiative involving emergency translation technology. Some kind of last resort system for high-value operatives. She nodded. That's the sanitized version. The truth is more complicated. She rolled up her sleeve, revealing a forearm laced with thin silver lines just beneath the skin. Implants of some kind. I did die at Neridian Pass, Rick. For exactly 6 minutes and 27 seconds. Rick stared at the silver tracery. What did they do to you? When critical Alliance personnel are at risk of capture or death, Phoenix activates. It's not just emergency translocation, it's complete biological reconstruction. Her voice was clinical, detached, as if she were briefing him on a mission parameter, rather than her own death and resurrection. The implants were installed during my last medical evaluation, without my knowledge or consent. The implication struck Rick with horrible clarity. They let you die knowing they could bring you back. Yes. And they kept me officially dead because what they recovered from the Keldari outpost was more significant than anyone realized. She tapped her temple. They put another implant here. It contains intelligence data downloaded directly from the Keldari systems before the outpost was destroyed. That's impossible, Rick protested. Our systems aren't compatible with Keldari tech. Their neural interfaces would kill a human or a Neridian. That's why they needed me dead first, Anra said simply. Dead tissue doesn't reject foreign interfaces the way living tissue does. They installed the data core while I was still flatlined, then restarted me. Rick felt sick. The Alliance he had served faithfully for 15 years had deliberately let one of their officers die as part of some ghoulish intelligence operation. Had perhaps even engineered the circumstances of her death. Why are you telling me this? Why now? Because 3 days ago I accessed some of the data stored in my head. Her fingers trembled slightly as she reached for his hand. Rick, what the Keldari were developing at that outpost, it's beyond anything we've seen before. And now, Black Division is hunting me to extract the implant and the intelligence it contains. Black Division, the elite internal security force of the Alliance, was the stuff of whispered rumors, even among high-ranking officers. They're involved in this. They're running it, Anra confirmed. Director Harmon personally oversaw my resurrection and implantation. When I escaped the facility, he deployed his best units to retrieve me. Rick's mind raced processing implications and plotting contingencies, a tactical habit that had kept him alive through years of service. We need to go underground. I have contacts in the lower districts who don't ask questions. There's more, Anra said, her voice dropping to a whisper. The implant. It's changing me. Sometimes I black out and wake up hours later with no memory of what I've done. I think they built in some kind of remote control mechanism. The rain had lessened to a steady patter as Rick started the transport's engines. First priority is getting you somewhere safe. Then we find someone who can remove that thing from your head. If such a person exists, Anra murmured. This is cutting-edge Alliance tech merged with alien systems. It may be beyond anyone's expertise. Rick reached across and squeezed her hand, feeling the subtle hardness of the implants beneath her skin. I just got you back from the dead. I'm not accepting any more impossible situations today. He piloted the transport away from the cemetery, taking a circuitous route through Neridian's rain-slicked streets. The city was a strange blend of architecture. Human utilitarian buildings, alongside the flowing organic structures of native Neridian design, all bathed in the harsh neon glow of commercial districts. The aftermath of the recent battle was still visible in scorched buildings and hastily erected barricades. The lower district medical center might have equipment we can use, Rick suggested, as they descended into the maze-like depths of the city. Anra shook her head firmly. Too many Alliance informants. There's a Neridian physician I know, Dr. Terrace. He runs an unofficial clinic in the Underspire. He helped injured Neridian resistance fighters during the early conflicts. A sympathizer, that's risky. He's also the only person I know with experience in both Neridian physiology and implant technology. There was a certainty in her voice that brooked no argument. Rick adjusted their course, diving deeper into the city's underbelly. The Underspire district was notorious, a labyrinthine sector built in the shadow of Neridian's original architectural spires. Law enforcement rarely ventured there, making it ideal for those wishing to disappear. As they descended to the lower levels, the artificial lighting dimmed, replaced by the bioluminescent fungi that Neridians cultivated in darker environments. The streets narrowed, forcing Rick to navigate carefully between stalls of street vendors and groups of hooded figures. There, Anra pointed to a narrow alleyway between two towering structures. Through there and down. Rick maneuvered the transport into the alley and powered down. We continue on foot, less conspicuous. They stepped out into the misty air of the Underspire. Here, the rain from above was filtered through dozens of levels of city infrastructure, emerging as a constant fine mist that gave the district its characteristic hazy appearance. Anra led the way, with confident steps navigating the twisting passages, with the familiarity of one who had traveled them many times. You've been here before, Rick observed. It wasn't a question. My people lived in these lower levels before the Alliance. Integration. She replied, her tone neutral, but with an undercurrent of long-buried resentment. My grandmother was a healer in this very district. After several minutes of walking, they arrived at a nondescript door set into the side of what appeared to be an ancient Neridian dwelling. The only marking was a small symbol etched into the frame, the Neridian glyph for healing. Anra pressed her palm against the door. A soft blue light emanated from beneath her hand, scanning her biometric signature. After a moment's pause, the door slid open silently. Biometric security for an underground clinic, Rick whispered. Dr. Terrace has many enemies on both sides of the conflict, Anra explained, as they entered a dimly lit corridor. The interior of the clinic was surprisingly advanced despite its hidden nature and modest entrance. Clean, white surfaces contrasted with the organic curves typical of Neridian design. Medical equipment, some Alliance standard, some clearly modified or custom-built, lined the walls of the main chamber. A tall, slender Neridian male emerged from a side room. Like Anra, he had the characteristic silver eyes of his species, though his were dulled with age. His long fingers were stained with medicinal compounds, and he wore a simple tunic adorned with pockets filled with various instruments. Anra, he greeted his voice carrying the musical lilt common to Neridian speech. I had heard rumors of your death. They were temporarily accurate, Terrace, she replied with a grim smile. The elderly Neridian's gaze shifted to Rick, eyes narrowing. And you bring an Alliance commander to my door? These must be desperate times indeed. He's with me, Anra said firmly. He can be trusted. Dr. Terrace studied Rick for a long moment before nodding once. Very well. What brings you to my humble establishment? Anra explained the situation succinctly, her death resurrection, and the implants now embedded in her body. As she spoke, Terrace's expression grew increasingly troubled. Show me, he finally requested. Anra sat on an examination table and allowed the physician to scan her with a handheld device. Holographic displays sprang to life around them, showing the network of implants threading throughout her body. Fascinating and disturbing in equal measure, Terrace murmured. The integration with your nervous system is extensive, and this, he pointed to a dense cluster at the base of her skull. This is unlike any Alliance technology I've encountered. That's the Keldari data core, Anra explained. Can you remove it? Terrace's long fingers manipulated the holographic display, zooming in on the implant. Perhaps, but not without risk. The interface has integrated with your brainstem. Removal could result in permanent neural damage or death. Again, Anra added with dark humor. Rick stepped forward. Is there any way to extract just the data without removing the implant? Possibly, Terrace conceded. But I would need equipment beyond what I have here. Alliance medical facilities. Not an option, Rick interrupted. Black Division is hunting her. Alliance facilities would be suicide. Terrace's silver eyes narrowed thoughtfully. There is an alternative. During the early conflicts, my predecessors salvaged equipment from a downed Alliance medical frigate. The technology is outdated by current standards, but it might suffice for our needs. Where is this equipment? Anra asked. In a storage facility deeper in the Underspire. It has remained untouched for years. Few have the knowledge to utilize it properly. Rick checked the time display on his wrist unit. How long would extraction take? With preparation, perhaps 6 hours, Terrace estimated. But first, I must conduct a more thorough examination. These implants are unlike anything I've seen before. While Terrace prepared his more advanced diagnostic equipment, Rick took up position near the clinic's entrance, periodically checking the security feeds that monitored the surrounding area. Anra watched him from the examination table. You're risking everything by helping me, she said quietly. Your career, possibly your life. Rick didn't turn from the monitors. My career was effectively over the moment I learned what the Alliance did to you. Some lines shouldn't be crossed even in war. And if I'm not the same person you knew, the question hung in the air between them. These implants, they've changed things inside me. Sometimes I feel thoughts that don't seem like my own. At this, Rick did turn to face her. The Anra I knew was defined by her choices, not her biology. Whatever they've done to your body, they haven't changed who you are. A sad smile touched her lips. You always did have more faith in me than I deserved. I had exactly as much faith in you as you earned, he corrected. That hasn't changed. Terrace returned with additional equipment, sleek, curved devices that he arranged around Anra's reclining form. I need to map the full neural interface before we proceed further. This will take approximately 1 hour. I suggest you use that time to rest, Commander. You look like you haven't slept properly in weeks. Rick wanted to protest, but the fatigue of the past weeks was indeed catching up with him. Wake me if anything changes, he conceded, settling into a chair with a clear view of both Anra and the security feeds. Despite his intentions to remain vigilant, exhaustion claimed him within minutes. His sleep was fitful, populated by dreams of Anra dying again and again in different scenarios, each time just beyond his reach. He awoke with a start to Terrace's hand on his shoulder. The Neridian physician's expression was grave. "What is it?" Rick demanded, immediately alert. "The neural mapping is complete," Terrace explained, leading him to a holographic display separate from where Anra lay sleeping. "The integration is more complex than I initially suspected. The Keldari data core has established connections to her limbic system, the emotional center of the brain." "Meaning what?" "Meaning that her emotional responses, her very memories, may be influenced by the data stored within. And there's more." Terrace manipulated the display, highlighting a small device nestled alongside the data core. "This appears to be a tracking beacon currently in passive mode. If activated, it would broadcast her location to anyone with the correct frequency." Rick's tactical mind immediately grasped the implications. They let her escape. They're waiting for her to lead them to something. Or someone. "It would appear so," Terrace agreed. "But there is something else that troubles me. This data core. It contains information so sensitive that the Alliance was willing to resurrect an officer to secure it. What could the Keldari have been developing that would warrant such measures?" Before Rick could respond, Anra's voice came from behind them. "I can answer that." She had awakened and moved silently to join them at the display. "During my blackouts, I've had visions, fragments of the data bleeding into my consciousness." "What have you seen?" Rick asked. "A weapon," she said simply. "Something the Keldari call the stellar destabilizer. It's designed to accelerate the fusion process in a star's core, causing premature collapse, or in some cases, supernova." The implications were staggering. A weapon that could destroy entire solar systems would shift the balance of power dramatically. "The Alliance can't be allowed to possess such technology," Rick said firmly. "Nor can the Keldari." "Then we find a way to extract the data and destroy it," Anra determined. Terrace looked troubled. "Extracting the data without removing the implant will be difficult. And even if we succeed, how do you propose to ensure the information is truly destroyed? The Alliance already knows it exists." "One problem at a time," Rick counseled. "First, we focus on getting the data out of Anra's head without killing her." Again, he added with a grim smile that Anra returned. Terrace nodded. "We should relocate to the storage facility immediately. If Black Division is tracking her remaining in one location for too long, is unwise." As they prepared to leave, Rick noticed Anra sway slightly, her hand going to her temple. "What is it?" he asked immediately at her side. "Just pressure," she murmured. "It happens sometimes, like something pushing against the inside of my skull." Rick exchanged a concerned glance with Terrace. "Is that normal with these implants?" "Nothing about this situation is normal," the physician replied. "But we should expedite our efforts. The longer the implant remains integrated with her system, the more difficult removal becomes." They left the clinic through a hidden back exit, emerging into an even deeper level of the underspire. Here, the passageways were narrower, the lighting provided solely by bioluminescent fungi that cast everything in an eerie blue glow. Terrace led them through a maze of corridors that seemed to defy conventional geography, occasionally pausing to input access codes into concealed panels. After nearly 20 minutes of navigating the labyrinth, they arrived at what appeared to be a dead end. The elderly Neridian pressed his palm against a seemingly solid wall, which shimmered and then dissolved, revealing a chamber beyond. "Neridian phase technology," he explained. "Crude by modern standards but effective for concealment." The storage facility was cavernous, filled with equipment salvaged from various Alliance and Keldari vessels. Most were covered in protective sheeting untouched for years. Terrace moved purposefully toward the far end of the chamber, where a large device stood partially assembled. "The neural extraction unit," he announced. "It will require some calibration, but it should serve our needs." As Terrace began preparing the equipment, Rick pulled Anra aside. "There's something I need to ask you," he said in a low voice. "And I need the truth." She met his gaze steadily. "Ask." "The night before the Neridian Pass mission, you accessed classified files on the outpost's security systems. Files you didn't have clearance for." It was a detail that had nagged at him during his investigation into her death. "Did you know what you were walking into?" Anra's silver eyes clouded momentarily. "Not exactly. I received an encrypted message from a Neridian resistance contact warning that the outpost contained something that could shift the war's balance. I wanted to verify before bringing unsubstantiated claims to command." "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because you would have been obligated to report it," she said simply. "And I needed to know if my people were being used again." The bitterness in her voice was unmistakable. The Alliance's history with the Neridians was complex. Promises of partnership that too often resembled subjugation. Rick wanted to argue but couldn't. She was right. His duty would have compelled him to report her unauthorized access. "And now," he asked instead, "what do you plan to do with the data once it's extracted?" "Destroy it," she said without hesitation. "Some weapons should never exist regardless of which side wields them." Before Rick could respond, Terrace called them over. "The equipment is ready," he announced. "But there is a complication. The extraction process will temporarily activate all implants, including the tracking beacon." "How temporary?" Rick asked, his tactical mind already calculating scenarios. "Minutes, perhaps," Terrace admitted. "Enough time for Black Division to pinpoint our location if they're monitoring." Rick paced the chamber, considering options. "We could set up a perimeter, prepare defensive positions." "In the Underspire," Anra interrupted. "Against Black Division? That's a losing battle and you know it." She was right again. Black Division operatives were the elite of the elite, trained specifically for extraction operations in hostile territory. In the confined spaces of the Underspire with limited exits, they would have no chance in a direct confrontation. "What about a diversion?" Rick suggested. "Something to draw their attention elsewhere while we complete the extraction." Terrace shook his head. "They would not be fooled so easily. Their tracking systems would lead them directly to the active beacon." A tense silence fell over the group as they grappled with the seemingly impossible situation. It was Anra who finally broke it. "What if we don't run?" she proposed. "What if we use their arrival to our advantage?" Rick looked at her skeptically. "Explain." "Black Division wants the data intact. They won't risk damaging it by using heavy weapons or direct neural disruption." Her eyes gleamed with the beginnings of a plan. "If we're mid-extraction when they arrive, they'll be forced to wait until the process is complete." Creating a standoff. Rick realized where her thinking was headed. "But what's to stop them from simply waiting us out and taking the data once extraction is complete?" "Because by then we'll have leverage," Anra said confidently. "The data will be external, and we can threaten to destroy it if they don't meet our terms." Terrace looked doubtful. "Black Division is not known for negotiation. They are when the alternative is failing their mission objective," Rick pointed out, warming to the plan. "Director Harmon may be ruthless, but he's practical. If the choice is between compromising and losing the data entirely, he'll compromise." "What would our terms be?" Terrace asked. Rick and Anra exchanged glances. "Immunity," Rick said firmly. "For all of us. And official recognition that the technology is too dangerous to be deployed by any faction." "Harmon would never agree to that second condition," Anra argued. "The stellar destabilizer is exactly the kind of advantage the Alliance has been seeking." "Then we need to make it worthless to them," Rick concluded. "We need to understand enough about the technology to convince them it's fundamentally flawed or counterproductive." Terrace's long fingers danced over the neural extractor's controls. "That would require analyzing the data during extraction, a risky proposition that could compromise the integrity of the process." "Do we have a choice?" Anra asked quietly. The physician sighed. "I suppose not. Very well, I will attempt to route a portion of the data stream to a secondary display for analysis. But this will extend the extraction time, giving Black Division more opportunity to mobilize. How much longer? Rick asked. An additional hour at minimum. Rick nodded grimly. Then we'd better get started. And while we're at it, we should prepare for less than optimal outcomes. He began surveying the chamber, identifying defensive positions and potential escape routes. Terrace guided Anra to the extraction unit, a reclined seat surrounded by curved arm-like appendages that would position themselves around her head during the procedure. As she settled into position, she reached out and caught Rick's hand. "If this goes wrong," she began. He squeezed her hand gently. "It won't." "But if it does," she insisted, "don't let them take me alive. Not again. Whatever they did to me the first time, I can't go through that again." The request hung heavy in the air between them. Finally, Rick nodded once, a solemn promise that he hoped he would never have to fulfill. Terrace activated the extraction unit. The arm-like appendages whirred to life, positioning themselves around Anra's head and connecting to the implants at her temples and the base of her skull. A holographic display materialized above her, showing the progress of the initialization sequence. "Beginning neural interfacing," Terrace announced. "Anra, you will experience intense sensory input as the system connects with the implants. Try to remain calm and focus on a fixed point." Anra's eyes locked with Rick's as the machine hummed to life. Her body tensed, fingers gripping the edges of the seat as the interface established connection. The holoscreen above her flickered with streams of data, some in Alliance standard, others in the angular script of the Keldari. "Tracking beacon is active," Terrace reported, his voice tight with tension. "Estimated time until Black Division can pinpoint our location, 15 minutes. Rick positioned himself near the chamber's entrance, weapon drawn. "How long until the extraction is complete?" "At this rate, approximately 90 minutes, Terrace replied, confirming their worst fears. "I've diverted a portion of the data stream as requested. It should appear on that auxiliary display." He nodded toward a smaller holographic projection that had appeared to one side. Rick moved to examine it, trying to make sense of the fragmented information scrolling past. Most was incomprehensible. Technical specifications and theoretical calculations beyond his training. But certain segments were recognizable: star classification systems, fusion equations, and what appeared to be deployment scenarios. "This confirms Anra's description," he called to Terrace. "It's definitely a stellar manipulation weapon. But there's something else here." He focused on a recurring pattern in the data. Some kind of limitation or flaw in the design. Terrace joined him, his trained eyes scanning the data more efficiently. "Yes, I see it. The energy requirements are extraordinary, far beyond conventional power sources. And there appears to be significant radiation bleed during activation." "Enough to endanger the deploying vessel?" Rick asked. "Enough to endanger an entire fleet," Terrace confirmed. "The radiation signature is unusual. It appears to be a variant of Cherenkov radiation, but with properties I've not encountered before." This was the leverage they needed. Proof that the weapon was as dangerous to its wielder as to its target. If they could demonstrate this to Harmon, perhaps they could convince him the technology was too flawed to pursue. Their planning was interrupted by a warning chime from Terrace's security system. "Movement in the upper corridors," the physician reported. Multiple signatures moving with tactical precision. "Black Division," Rick confirmed, checking his weapon. "Sooner than expected." "The beacon must be more powerful than I estimated," Terrace admitted. "We have perhaps 10 minutes before they reach this chamber." Rick made a quick decision. "Terrace, continue the extraction. I'll try to slow them down, buy us some time." He moved toward the exit. "Wait," Anra called, her voice strained from the extraction process. "My service pistol, in my boot. Keldari manufacture. It'll penetrate Black Division armor." Rick retrieved the weapon, a sleek silver device unlike standard Alliance sidearms. Its grip adjusted to his hand as he held it, conforming to his unique pressure patterns. Adaptive interface, Anra explained with a pained smile. A little souvenir from the outpost. With both weapons secured, Rick moved into the corridor beyond the chamber. The labyrinthine nature of the underspire would work to his advantage, allowing him to set up ambush points and create bottlenecks where Black Division's superior numbers would count for less. He had just finished setting a makeshift proximity sensor at a junction when his comlink activated. Only one person had that secure frequency. "Commander Carter," came the smooth, cultured voice of Director Harmon. "This is an unexpected field assignment for an officer of your standing." Rick maintained silence, unwilling to give away his position through sound. "There's no need for theatrics, Commander," Harmon continued. "We've been tracking Lieutenant Vey since she left our facility. Her unauthorized departure was anticipated, even planned for." This confirmed Rick's suspicion that Anra's escape had been allowed, but hearing it stated so casually fueled his anger. "What you're doing is illegal, even by wartime standards," Rick finally responded, keeping his voice low. "Experimental procedures on Alliance personnel without consent, withholding information from command about a recovered enemy weapon system. All sanctioned at the highest levels, I assure you," Harmon replied unruffled. "The Alliance Senate Special Committee on Advanced Warfare authorized Project Phoenix 5 years ago. Your Lieutenant Vey is merely the latest success story." "She died," Rick hissed. "A temporary setback, as you've discovered." Harmon's tone was almost conversational. "Now I'm offering you one opportunity to resolve this situation without bloodshed. Surrender Lieutenant Vey and the Keldari Data Corps, and I'm authorized to offer you a lateral transfer rather than a court-martial." "And Anra, what happens to her?" A pause. "She will be treated humanely, of course. The implants will be removed once we've extracted all relevant data." "And you expect me to believe that?" Rick scoffed. "After you deliberately let her die to install them in the first place?" Another pause, longer this time. "I see she's shared quite a bit with you. That complicates matters." Rick heard the subtle shift in Harmon's tone. The offer was being withdrawn. In the distance, he could make out the soft footfalls of approaching operatives. They were being careful, but the acoustics of the Underspire's corridors carried sound in unpredictable ways. "What if I told you the weapon is fundamentally flawed?" Rick pressed, playing his one card. "That deployment results in catastrophic radiation exposure to the launching vessel and surrounding fleet." "I would say you're stalling," Harmon replied, but there was a new note of interest in his voice. "Though if you have evidence of such a flaw, that would certainly be worth discussing." "Call off your operatives and I'll show you the preliminary analysis," Rick offered. "We're already extracting the data. Once complete, we can discuss terms." The comlink was silent for several seconds. Finally, Harmon spoke again. "You have 1 hour, Commander. My operatives will maintain position but will not advance. If, at the end of that time, you have not produced both Lieutenant Vey and verifiable evidence of this alleged flaw, they will proceed with the extraction, with extreme prejudice." The comlink went silent. Rick didn't trust Harmon's agreement, but even a temporary reprieve was valuable. He quickly made his way back to the chamber, where Terrace was monitoring Anra's vital signs with growing concern. "Her neural activity is becoming erratic," the physician reported. "The extraction is placing significant stress on her nervous system." Anra's face was contorted in pain, her body rigid in the extraction seat. The holographic display above her showed the data transfer at only 30% completion. "We have an hour before Black Division moves in," Rick informed them, explaining his conversation with Harmon. "Can we complete the extraction in that time?" Terrace looked doubtful. "At the current rate, no. But I might be able to accelerate the process if we focus solely on the weapons data and ignore the auxiliary implant systems." "Do it," Rick ordered. "And I need any evidence of the radiation flaw compiled and ready to present. That's our only leverage." While Terrace worked to recalibrate the extraction unit, Rick returned to Anra's side. Her silver eyes found his clouded with pain, but still alert. "Harmon won't honor any deal," she warned, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know," Rick agreed. But we need time, and once we have the data extracted, we'll have options we don't have now. A tremor ran through Anra's body, causing the extraction unit to emit a warning tone. "Something's wrong," she gasped. "The implants are fighting the extraction." Terrace hurried over, checking the readings. There appears to be a security protocol embedded in the Keldari data core. It's attempting to rewrite itself to prevent extraction. "Can you override it?" Rick demanded. "I'm trying." Terrace's fingers moved rapidly over the controls. "But it's adaptive. Every countermeasure I implement is being analyzed and neutralized." Anra's back arched in sudden pain. "It's in my head," she cried out. "I can feel it, like it's burning through my thoughts." Rick gripped her hand tightly. "Fight it, Anra. Focus on me, on my voice. You're stronger than whatever they put inside you." For several agonizing minutes, Terrace and Rick worked frantically to stabilize the extraction process, while Anra battled the invasive security protocols, attempting to preserve the data core. Finally, Terrace announced a breakthrough. "I've isolated the security algorithm," he reported. "It's sophisticated but predictable in its responses. I can create a recursive loop that will occupy its defensive measures while we extract the core data." "Do it," Rick ordered, never releasing Anra's hand. The next 40 minutes passed in tense silence, broken only by the hum of the extraction unit and Terrace's occasional updates on their progress. Anra's condition stabilized somewhat, though she remained in obvious discomfort. "Extraction at 85%, Terrace finally announced. "The core data on the stellar destabilizer has been successfully transferred to an external storage device." "And the radiation flaw," Rick pressed. Terrace gestured to a separate display. "Confirmed. The weapon generates an exotic radiation field that extends well beyond the target system. Any vessel within light years of the deployment point would be exposed to potentially fatal levels." Rick nodded grimly. "Good, now we—" His words were cut short by the sound of the chamber's entrance sliding open. Director Harmon stepped through, flanked by 4 Black Division operatives in full tactical gear. Unlike the operatives who wore helmets with polarized visors, Harmon's face was exposed, revealing a middle-aged man with sharp features and calculating eyes. "Your hour isn't up," Rick challenged, positioning himself between the newcomers and Anra. "I said my operatives wouldn't advance," Harmon corrected smoothly. "I made no such promise about myself." His gaze moved past Rick to the extraction unit. "I see you've made progress. Excellent. We've confirmed the flaw in the weapon design," Rick stated, nodding toward the data display. "The radiation bleed makes deployment suicidal for any Alliance vessel." Harmon approached the display, studying it with a scientist's practiced eye. "Interesting," he murmured, "but not insurmountable. Radiation shielding could be enhanced deployment protocols adjusted to account for the danger zone." "The radiation persists for decades," Terrace interjected. "And it's unlike anything in our current classification systems. There's no guarantee our shielding would be effective." "A challenge for our engineers, certainly," Harmon conceded. "But hardly a reason to abandon such a powerful strategic asset." He turned to face Rick directly. "Now, as we agreed, Lieutenant Vey and the extracted data." "We agreed to nothing," Rick replied coldly. "You offered terms which I've now heard and rejected." Harmon sighed, a sound of practiced patience worn thin. "Commander, you're an intelligent man. Look around you. My operatives have secured all exits from this level. You are outnumbered and outgunned. What exactly do you hope to achieve here?" "A compromise," Rick proposed. "You get a copy of the data. All the technical specifications your engineers will need to evaluate the weapon's viability and its flaws. Anra goes free with the implants removed and receives an honorable discharge with full benefits. And what assurance do I have that additional copies of this highly classified data won't find their way to interested parties?" Harmon countered. "My word as an Alliance officer," Rick said simply. Harmon studied him for a long moment. "Once that might have been sufficient, but your actions today suggest your loyalty to the Alliance is compromised." "My loyalty is to what the Alliance claims to stand for," Rick corrected. Not to secret projects that violate every ethical standard we supposedly uphold. The extraction unit emitted a series of tones, drawing everyone's attention. The process is complete, Terrace announced, disconnecting the various interfaces from Anra's temples and skull. She slumped in the seat, exhausted, but conscious. Harmon nodded to his operatives, who raised their weapons. I am afraid I must insist on taking both Lieutenant Vey and all copies of the extracted data into custody. Rick's hand moved to his sidearm, but he knew the gesture was futile against 4 Black Division operatives. This was the moment he had been dreading. The standoff, with no good outcomes. To everyone's surprise, it was Anra who broke the impasse. The data is already gone, she announced, her voice weak but determined. All eyes turned to her. Explain, Harmon demanded. While you were negotiating, I accessed the extraction unit's transmission functions, she explained. The complete data package, including all evidence of the radiation flaw, has been transmitted on a coded frequency to a secure drop point. Harmon's composed exterior cracked slightly. That's impossible. We were monitoring all communications from this location. Not Neridian shadow frequencies, Terrace interjected. A communication method developed during the early resistance, undetectable by Alliance monitoring systems. Whether this was true, or a desperate bluff, Rick couldn't tell. But the uncertainty in Harmon's expression suggested it was at least plausible enough to give him pause. Who received the transmission? Harmon demanded. Multiple recipients, Anra claimed, with instructions to release the information publicly if anything happens to us. She managed to sit up straighter, meeting Harmon's gaze directly. The Alliance Senate might overlook Project Phoenix's ethical violations in the name of national security. But they'll be considerably less forgiving when they learn you've been pursuing a weapon that could kill as many Alliance personnel as enemy combatants. The chamber fell silent as Harmon calculated his options. Finally, he stepped back. You've created a complicated situation, Lieutenant Vey. One that will require careful management. He turned to Rick. What exactly is it you want, Commander? Exactly what I said before, Rick replied. Anrago's free implants removed honorable discharge. You get a copy of the data for your engineers to study, and official recognition that deployment of such a weapon violates Alliance statutes on proportional warfare. Harmon's expression revealed nothing. And you, Commander, what do you want for yourself? The same deal for me, Rick stated. Honorable discharge, no repercussions. After a tense moment, Harmon nodded once. I'll need to consult with my superiors, but I believe such an arrangement could be acceptable, under the circumstances. Rick didn't believe for a second that Harmon would honor such a deal long-term. But it would get them out of the immediate crisis, giving them time to implement whatever contingency plans they could devise. We'll need that in writing, Rick insisted. Signed and witnessed. Of course, Harmon agreed too readily. My operatives will escort you to a secure Alliance facility where the necessary documents can be prepared. No, Anra interjected. The implants come out first here, then we'll discuss relocation. Harmon's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. That wasn't part of our agreement. It is now, Rick supported her. Dr. Terrace can perform the procedure with your medical staff observing if you wish. But it happens here where we have leverage. The implied threat, that the mysterious recipients of the transmitted data were standing by, hung in the air between them. Finally, Harmon nodded curtly. Very well. My medical officer will assist and observe. He gestured, and one of the operatives stepped forward, removing their helmet to reveal a woman with close-cropped hair and the insignia of a medical specialist on her collar. The procedure to remove the remaining implants took nearly 3 hours, a delicate process that required Terrace's expertise with Neridian physiology and the Black Division medic's knowledge of the Alliance technology. Throughout, Rick maintained his vigilance, watching Harmon for any sign of betrayal. When it was finally complete, Anra was unconscious but stable. The removed implants lay in a sealed container, which Harmon promptly secured. "She'll need at least 24 hours to recover before transport," Terrace informed them. "Unacceptable," Harmon began, but Rick cut him off. "Non-negotiable," he stated firmly. "Unless you want those data packets released immediately." Harmon's cold eyes narrowed, but he relented. 24 hours. My operatives will secure the perimeter. No one enters or leaves without my authorization." With that, he and 3 of his team departed, leaving the medical officer behind to monitor Anra's condition. Once they were alone, Terrace approached Rick. "I should tell you," he whispered, "that the transmission bluff was creative. This equipment has no such capability." Rick nodded minutely. "I suspected as much, but Harmon couldn't be certain." "And when he discovers the truth?" "By then, I hope we'll have implemented a more permanent solution," Rick replied quietly. The next 18 hours passed in uneasy tension. Anra drifted in and out of consciousness, each time staying awake a little longer. The Black Division medic remained professional, but distant, reporting Anra's vital signs to Harmon at regular intervals. During one of her more lucid periods, Rick sat beside Anra, speaking softly, so the medic couldn't overhear. "When you're strong enough, we need to move. Harmon won't honor his word once he has us in an Alliance facility." Anra nodded weakly. "I know. I've been thinking—" She paused, gathering her strength. "The Keldari outpost where this all began. The data in my head showed its location and security protocols." "The outpost was destroyed in the battle," Rick reminded her. "The primary facility, yes," she agreed. "But there was a secondary site. A testing facility for the Stellar Destabilizer's emission systems. It's still active, still developing the prototype." Rick's mind raced with implications. If we could destroy that facility, the research would be set back years, possibly abandoned entirely, Anra confirmed. And more importantly, we'd have proof to take to the Alliance Senate, evidence of both the weapon's existence and its fundamental flaws. It was a desperate plan, infiltrating enemy territory with Black Division likely in pursuit once they realized what was happening. But it was also their best chance to permanently neutralize the threat of the Stellar Destabilizer. "We'll need transportation weapons," Rick began planning aloud. "Terrace has connections in the Underspire," Anra suggested. "And my implants may be gone, but I still remember the facility's layout and protocols." Rick squeezed her hand gently. "Rest. Build your strength. Tomorrow we move." The opportunity came sooner than expected. During a shift change among the Black Division operatives, Terrace identified a 6-minute window where perimeter security would be minimal. With the elderly physician's help, they secured civilian clothing, basic supplies, and access to a maintenance passageway that would lead them to a secondary exit from the Underspire. When the moment arrived, Rick helped Anra to her feet. She was weak but determined, her silver eyes burning with purpose. "You understand what we're attempting," he confirmed. "Infiltrating a Keldari facility, deep in contested space with minimal equipment and no backup." A ghost of her old smile crossed her face. "Sounds like every other mission you've assigned me, Commander." With Terrace providing a diversion, a minor medical emergency that required the Black Division medic's attention, they slipped into the maintenance passage. The journey through the Underspire's bowels was arduous, especially for Anra in her weakened state, but they emerged hours later in a commercial district far from Harmon's perimeter. Terrace's connections provided them with a small, unmarked transport vessel, ostensibly a salvage ship but modified with enhanced engines and rudimentary stealth systems. Within 12 hours of their escape, they were breaking Neridian's atmosphere, heading for the coordinates Anra had extracted from the implant data. The journey to the Keldari testing facility took 3 days, navigating through contested space and avoiding both Alliance and Keldari patrols. During that time, Anra's strength returned gradually, and they developed their infiltration plan using the facility schematics she had memorized. The facility is powered by a thermal exchanger that harnesses energy from a nearby radiation belt, she explained, sketching the layout on a datapad. "It's what allows them to generate the immense power needed for weapon testing. If we can overload the exchanger, the resulting radiation surge should destroy the facility and all research within. And how do we avoid being destroyed along with it? Rick asked practically. The surge won't be instantaneous. We'll have approximately 15 minutes to reach minimum safe distance. She paused, looking up at him. It's not a generous margin for error. Rick studied the schematics. Never is in our line of work. As they approached the coordinates, the facility came into view. A sprawling complex built into the side of an asteroid in the system's radiation belt. True to ANRA's intelligence, security was minimal. The Keldari, relying on the remote location and hostile environment for protection rather than heavy defenses. Using the salvage ship's credentials as cover, they docked at a maintenance port, their arrival logged as a scheduled supply delivery. The interior of the facility was sparsely populated, mostly automated systems, with a minimal crew of Keldari technicians. Moving carefully through the service corridors, they made their way toward the central power control room. Twice, they were forced to hide from passing technicians, pressing themselves into maintenance alcoves as the tall, insectoid Keldari moved past mandibles, clicking in their native language. The power control room was unmanned, another indication of the Keldari's overconfidence in their remote location. Rick secured the entrance while ANRA accessed the thermal exchanger controls. This will take a few minutes, she warned, her fingers moving rapidly over the alien interface. Their security protocols are complex, but I remember the bypass sequences from the implant data. Rick kept watch weapon ready. How will we know when it's done? Oh, we'll know, ANRA assured him grimly. When the overload initiates, every alarm in the facility will activate. Then, we'll have exactly 15 minutes to get back to the ship and reach minimum safe distance. As if on cue, the moment she completed the final sequence, a deafening klaxon began to sound throughout the facility. Warning lights flashed, bathing the control room in pulses of crimson. Time to go, ANRA announced, stepping away from the controls. They raced back through the corridors, now filled with panicked Keldari technicians, rushing to investigate the alarms. In the confusion, Rick and ANRA were able to blend in with the general evacuation, making their way back toward the docking bay. They were within sight of their vessel when they encountered the first armed resistance, 2 Keldari security officers blocking the entrance to the bay. We need a distraction, Rick murmured, assessing the situation. ANRA pointed to a nearby environmental control panel. Atmosphere regulation. If I overload it... Rick nodded, understanding. Do it. With a few quick adjustments to the panel, ANRA triggered a localized atmospheric depressurization warning. As the security officers moved to investigate, Rick and ANRA slipped past them into the docking bay. They had just reached their ship when the facility's internal comm system crackled to life, broadcasting an announcement in the clicking, hissing language of the Keldari. They've identified the sabotage, ANRA translated, her expression grim. They're initiating emergency containment protocols. Will it stop the overload? Rick asked, as they boarded the vessel. No, but it will slow it down. We might have a few extra minutes, but the radiation surge is now inevitable. As Rick powered up the engines, the docking bay doors began to close, the facility's automated lockdown procedures engaging. With seconds to spare, they maneuvered the ship through the narrowing gap and into open space. Behind them, the facility was visibly changing, the thermal exchanger's housing glowing with an unnatural blue light as radiation levels climbed beyond safe parameters. Small explosions dotted the exterior as subsystems failed under the increasing pressure. How far do we need to be? Rick asked, pushing the ship's engines to maximum thrust. At least 50,000 kilometers, ANRA replied, monitoring the radiation levels on their sensors. At our current speed, we'll just make it. The minutes ticked by in tense silence as they put distance between themselves and the doomed facility. In the rear view screen, the blue glow intensified, spreading throughout the asteroid structure. 5 minutes to minimum safe distance, ANRA reported. 7 minutes until estimated detonation. Rick pushed the engines beyond recommended parameters, the ship shuddering under the strain. We'll make it, he assured her, though the margin was narrower than he would have liked. When they finally reached the calculated safe zone, both turned to watch the view screen. For several moments, nothing seemed to happen. The facility continued to pulse with that eerie blue light, but no catastrophic failure occurred. Did the containment protocols work? Rick wondered aloud. Anra shook her head, eyes fixed on the readings. No, it's still building. The radiation levels are... Her words were cut short as the facility suddenly erupted in a blinding flash of blue-white light. The explosion was unlike anything Rick had seen before. Not the typical fire and debris of conventional detonations, but a pulsing sphere of energy that seemed to distort the very space around it. Radiation wave incoming, Anra warned, checking the sensors. Brace for impact. Seconds later, the wave hit their ship, causing systems to flicker and alarms to sound. The vessel rocked violently, throwing them against their restraints. For one terrifying moment, it seemed the engines might fail entirely. Then gradually, the system stabilized. Damage report, Rick asked, running diagnostics. Minor radiation damage to exterior sensors, Anra reported. Navigation and propulsion systems intact. We made it, Rick. We made it. With the immediate danger past, they set course for neutral space, where they could safely transmit their evidence to carefully selected members of the Alliance Senate. Officials, known for their ethical stances and opposition to weapons of mass destruction. The response was swift. Within days, an emergency session of the Senate Military Oversight Committee was convened. Director Harmon was placed on administrative leave pending investigation, and Project Phoenix was suspended for comprehensive review. 6 months later, Rick and Anra stood once again before the grave marker in Neridian Cemetery. The acid rain had given way to a rare, clear day sunlight gleaming off the polished stone. They're converting it to a memorial, Rick observed, nodding toward the marker. For all who fell at Neridian Pass. Anra nodded her hand unconsciously, moving to her abdomen, where a small but noticeable bump had begun to form. The doctors had confirmed what they had suspected. Despite the trauma of her death and resurrection, despite the implants and their removal, new life had found a way. Half human, half Neridian, she murmured. The first of its kind as far as anyone knows. Rick placed his arm around her shoulders. A symbol of something new, something better than what we were fighting for. Their official status remained complicated. Neither fully discharged nor reinstated, they had been designated special advisors to the newly formed Ethics in Advanced Warfare Commission, a compromise that kept them within the Alliance structure while acknowledging their actions. Do you ever regret it? Anra asked suddenly. Giving up your command, your career? Rick looked down at her, at the silver eyes that had once been lost to him forever. Not for a moment. Some things are worth any price. She leaned against him, drawing strength from his presence. The Keldari are already rebuilding their research facilities, and Harmon has supporters in the Senate who want to restart Phoenix. Let them try, Rick said with quiet confidence. We've proven something important, that even in war, even in death, there are lines that shouldn't be crossed. And more importantly, he added with a smile, we've proven that good people won't accept predetermined endings. As they turned to leave the cemetery, Anra cast one last glance at the memorial that had once been her grave. To refusing the end, she said softly. Rick squeezed her hand. To new beginnings. Hand in hand, they walked away from the grave and into the future they had fought so hard to secure. A future built not on weapons of unimaginable destruction, but on the simple, profound power of refusing to accept that some stories must end in tragedy.